am super pumped to have you here, Dr. Walsh. We've been trying to connect for a while and we finally did it. Our schedules, the magic of schedules overlapped, and I've got you for the next 45 minutes, and I cannot wait to share with the audience some of your amazing insights from your work at Microsoft Canada, but also based on your wealth of experience across many different industries and areas.
Oh, well, Dr. Singera, I have been so excited for our time together, and 45 minutes just feels like it's never going to be enough time. So,
Definitely.
yeah, I am so excited to jump in with you on this conversation.
It definitely will never be enough. We'll have to make sure that we'll have you back at some point, but you and I professionally are going to continue to cross paths, I have no doubt.
Yes.
I just read a piece of research actually that women who have PhDs are so rarely introduced as doctor. And men who have PhDs always insist that they're introduced as doctor. So I wanted to make sure that today we embodied it, because we tend to, when we've had conversations in the past, we have really focused on, we also identify as women and women in an industry coming up, working in private, both the public and private sectors, and what it means to feel empowered or have a voice. And we're trying to bring some of those learnings and understandings into the work that we do to support the empowerment and use of voice of women coming up after us. But we're not starting there. We're not going to get too heavy right away. Let's first talk about your title, Associate Vice President of Teaching and Learning at Microsoft Canada. What does that mean, Elka? What does an Associate Vice President of Teaching and Learning do at a company like Microsoft Canada?
I am so lucky. I have the opportunity to collaborate with universities and colleges and polytechnics and school boards across the country to help them with the art of the possible for how can we think about teaching and learning and igniting that intrinsic motivation for learning, that curiosity, and really create the opportunity for transformation of the way we do teaching and learning, and by extension then helping transform lives. And fundamentally that's what it's all about for me. And so that Microsoft gives me the opportunity to bring that passion for how can we create incredible experiences and help elevate our institutions across the country. I'm so lucky, and that's what I get to do every day.
And when we talk about this idea of transformation in education, this idea of looking at what is possible, we'll draw this initial connection here between where you are now working in this role and doing this work with Microsoft Canada. And I want to take you all the way back to some of your first experiences with systems of education, because ultimately, did you know when you went to school, like, did you like school as a young child when you went to elementary school? Were you one of those ones who like lived for summer vacation? Because I hated summer vacation, Elka. I wanted to go back to school. I always really loved it. But like, did you identify, because of course we're going to draw on some gaps and some challenges that education systems face now, and the role that technology might play in helping to address those. Did you know that when you were younger, or what were some of your first impressions of school? Useful, not useful, interesting, horribly boring?
Yeah, I've always had a thirsty brain. Like, I just really have always wanted to explore and discover things. And so I loved school. There were some subjects were not my favorite. Everyone's got their favorites. But I loved the environment. I loved being with other people and being curious together. Like, that's really where I got a lot of my energy from, and from a very young age, always the same. And I've moved in and out of different domains of interest. If you go back in time, I used to love art. And then as I went into university, I initially went to university to study math. I was going to be an actuary. And then,
Oh my goodness.
oh yeah, so imagine, there I am in my second year of university, but I've taken some political science and economics course as breadth. This is again why I think our post-secondary institutions are so important, because they help us uncover who we really are and the things that get us energized and the way we want to contribute in our world. And I realized I was so passionate about political science and economics and our society, and how are we organizing ourselves, and what do we care about from a public policy perspective, and how does that find expression. So that's when I changed completely in my second year of university and moved into political science, which is eventually where I got my PhD in that domain. So, for me, it is what drives me then in the way that education and learning really built me is that sense of contribution, that sense of, we're going to do something that will make our world better. But I thought I was going to be an academic. I thought I was going to teach. I loved teaching. I loved sharing curiosity. And I think, well, life had other plans for me.
Well, and I definitely think that there are lines that can be drawn between those skills and those attributes and what you
Yeah.
do now. Absolutely. I want to just touch on because I had a wonderful opportunity to interview my mother for the podcast. And I told her then, although I've told her multiple times already before, that there was a very definitive moment in my life when I went to university. And I knew I loved education. Elka, I had a thirsty brain. I knew I loved teaching. I was already a camp counselor, like youngest camp counselor, and I loved kids. And so I knew I wanted to be a teacher. My mother said to me, don't apply to a teaching degree because you know that you like teaching. But what you don't know is other things that you might like. Who now would ever encourage their child to take a general arts degree? Well, apparently my mother, because she was like, I want you to take courses in psychology, anthropology. Like, you don't know what you don't know. You think you know what you want, but you actually have no idea. So go and expose yourself. So I could not agree more that post-secondary education, as I experienced it, as you experienced it, was an opportunity to be exposed to areas of domains of content and interests that sparked things in us. But I want to, drawing again on this idea of my mother was a critical influence for me. How did you learn? Because this is a skill. Switching a degree program after 2 years, Elka, is not an easy thing to do. For a lot of people nowadays, especially with the kind of pressure, students, they're in debt going to post-secondary education, okay? They don't necessarily have the support. They want to get in, they want to get out, they want to make money. A lot of us, right? So where did you learn that it was okay to do that? Like, to have the courage to do that? Was that something that you were supported in doing in your home and in your family life? Because even that, you mentioned that, I switched degrees. But even that act is a brave act. And I think that there are students who need to hear that act is possible.
Yeah.
Part of the possible.
Absolutely. I am so lucky because gosh, if you go back in time and you too blessed with parents who see things and bring their wisdom to bear, right? What beautiful insight from your mother. And when I think about my own parents, they were really super clear, right? You're going to do what you're good at. Do the thing that you are good at, and that is the thing that you are meant to bring. And it wasn't necessarily always just about money. That is absolutely. I mean, we all have to be pragmatic. We all have to feed ourselves. But at the end of the day, the power, I think, of education is just that. It's uncovering all of these different ways of experiencing the world, understanding the world, and figuring out how we can contribute. And it's not always a straight line. When I think about it and you look back on my career, and it all makes perfect sense. But in the moments and the way the decision points along the way, it does take courage and it does take the bravery to say this and not this for myself. And really putting behind all of those expectations, right? That society or we think our friends and family have for us, and really understanding that really the people who care about us just want us to find joy, to find the thing that gives us energy, and contribute and breathe the oxygen into the world that we're meant to do. And that's not always an easy thing to see. And so, I think that's where really bringing around you the people who will help you have that courage is so important. It's not easy to be brave, and at any point, whether you decide to carry on and do multiple degrees and not go to the world of work, or go straight into the world of work, for me, one of those moments when I realized that where I needed to contribute was not just from the degree I wanted to do. But when I realized I didn't want to be an academic,
Mm,
um, that's a really scary moment after all of this time of investment. I mean, gosh, right? So it's another almost 9 years after a first degree that you finally graduate from a PhD. After
yes.
2 years of a master's, seven of a PhD, that's a lot of investment. And so what I realized though, it was a student that helped me see this path. And I think that's where it's being open to all of these signals and taking in information in the many places that it comes from. So this one student I was teaching at a college in Toronto, and he says, "I think I understand what you're trying to say to me, but how does this relate to my life?" And for me, that was so profound. It was that moment of, gosh, as a good teacher, it's not just about giving a compelling lecture where they're taking notes from you. But it's really making those connections and experiential learning and that opportunity for them to make those real connections, that authentic experience. So he changed things for me enormously because that's when I left teaching and I left doing research and I went to become a curriculum designer and a learning designer because I
Mm.
became so impassioned with the idea that if we could be as educators thoughtful about how we create curiosity for learners, we could ignite this light in them. And so that was how I found my path into curriculum design. And for me, that has been where, and now where you see, I think, why my path into Microsoft is maybe a little bit more obvious because for me, then it's about how do we create these systems that raise the capacity, raise the tide, raise curiosity for everyone.
And I'm definitely going to pull on that thread. The other thing I want to just mention in that amazing insight you just shared is authenticity, because we share one of the reasons we love talking to each other so much is because we both share a great passion for what we do. We are both people who are interested in contribution and impact, these words that you've mentioned a couple times now. I just want to name the truth of the matter for folks out there listening that there were choices, like you said, bravery to say, I'm going to do this and not this. And there are consequences to those choices. Like I lived on $24,000 a year for 3 years. I had 5 jobs, part-time jobs, 5 different part-time jobs to pay my rent and to do a PhD, to do my master's, to build my own business, to start my own business, to build my own business. Like I think the other thing that people choosing a path of like I feel like there's now a lot of hunger for this. I want to contribute. I want to have impact, but I also want my condo and I also want to live in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I also, want a car. I want to go out every Friday and Saturday night. And Michelle Obama says it very well when she says, you can't have everything. It's just not necessarily at the same time. So I want to be authentic in the sense that, yes, Elka and I are very passionate people and have made decisions to pursue our passions. But we've had, I speak for myself, but I have had to make choices along the way that I have had to say. My friend asked me the other day, because I'm also from a German mother and an OCD Indian father, so I have budgets and things like that. And sometimes my friends will be like, how do you keep your budget and everything? How do you stay in your budget? And I'm like, it's about the choices you make.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to choose this professional path, if I'm going to choose this, then I understand that means I'm going to have to not have something else in my life. As you were talking through this kind of early stages of your career, does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. It is all about choices. And at the end of the day, it's all about hard work. Nothing comes from nothing is the adage, right? There's another one that luck favors the prepared.
Yeah.
Well, that's hard work. And it is about sometimes saying, yeah, you know what? I can't go out tonight and have fun with my friends because I got to go and work because otherwise I can't pay my rent. I can't pay my tuition. Or I have to work really, really hard to get really good grades because I need a scholarship. And I need to keep my scholarship. But those are really important choices that we make in our lives. And they are the experiences then that make us who we are. And I think it's that grit then, that opportunity, that thing that makes us human. And it's again why I love learning so much. And I think it's the most important investment we can ever make in each other and ourselves, is because it does lift. And it's a long-term game. When I think about how short-term we've become, how quick we need to
Yes.
communicate, right? In our social media era, in just a few characters, we need to be able to share and exchange so much information. But learning is a long game. It's a long-term investment. But it is one that reaps rewards. And there is tons of research to prove this out around what are the long-term life benefits. And so, when I think about everything that's happening in our world right now, whether it's the social and political unrest that we're experiencing, or the economic uncertainty, as well as digital transformation, the more we can continue to invest in sort of a lifelong journey of what is learning, the more we can continue to raise ourselves up. And I think that's the opportunity. That's the opportunity for us to not look for the easy way out, but actually really focus in together.
And if we can encourage people in this short-term thinking mindset world that we live in, fast consumerist culture, fast fashion, all of it, what if we could encourage people, as our parents supported us in doing, circle or hone in on what we like doing, what we're good at doing, but what we're passionate about, or people get all touchy about the word passion. I don't have a passion. Okay, you like certain things, you're good at certain things. If we could hone in more and make decisions around our education earlier about these types of topics, and not think as much, not never, but as much about the financial economic output of a job. Like, how many people are in an economics degree or being accountants, or, because they think, or lawyers or doctors, because they are thinking of the financial output. Do you really like what the discipline that you're in any way, shape, or form? Is it engaging to you or interesting to you? Because the kind of grit that you're talking about these investments being more long-term, I believe one of the reasons we persevered and we've evolved and adapted, but have stayed under the umbrella, very similar umbrella of topics and disciplines, is because there is a belief, something in us, that this is where we're meant to be. And I really feel for first-year university students going in, and they are not being encouraged to pursue a general arts degree as I was. And they are facing severe economic constraints and some of these, ideals that we're talking about. But I think it's important to talk about, because I think it's important to recenter the role of post-secondary education. Yes, it's to be economically viable, but it's also to spark, expose, get curious. And I think we've lost sight of that to a certain degree because of how dire so many individual circumstances are financially. Let's go back to your poli-sci degree and this idea of policy, because it was really interesting what you studied, and I'd love to know more about how this applies. So, you went down this academic route and then into the learning design route, but let's map this other trajectory that also fed into the Microsoft well before we get there. This idea of policy shift, policy change, how has that political background influenced where you are now and how you approach this idea of learning experience design?
Yeah. So, it all begins with change. What is the art of the possible? And so in my studies, I focused on change. How do governments change policies? How do they think about that? How do they learn about it? And how might they even learn from other jurisdictions about where the innovation opportunity is? And when I think about that, it's a really obvious trajectory, and that's the one thread I think that sits through everything that I've ever done, is really how do we keep our eye to the horizon, and in between we're going to to keep the metaphor of sailing, we're going to tack and jibe as we go, but we are eventually going to get to that point that we're looking for. And that's the thing I think that has really been the place where I wanted to contribute. And that's the excellence that I bring, is how do we chart out what does that horizon look like, and what is the path to get us there? And so, that is what I taught. It's what I researched. And now in my work, you can see where I get to practice it every day with the organizations and the people that I get to work with, is helping to empower them to think about what is their transformation. And I do that now within this context of all of this change that's happening from a digital transformation perspective in society, in the future of work, and in our economy. So, I think that's the one place that if I were to point to, that's the common thread and the foundation that I always built on. That was it.
That's just part one of this exciting conversation, my friends. Click on part two and continue with us on this important journey we like to call the education revolution.